In this world, people can gain incredible abilities by eating the fruit of the skill tree, which decides their future. Some get lucky and become heroes like firebenders who control flames, or sword saints who master swords and become legends. Light dreams of becoming a great adventurer and hopes to get a powerful skill to help him fight monsters and protect others. But when his time comes, his skill turns out to be nutting master, something far less exciting than he imagined. On the day of the skill ceremony, Light and his best friend Lena walk together to the church, both full of excitement and curiosity about what skills they might receive. Light chats about his dreams of adventure, thinking any combat skill would be perfect for him, while Lena smiles and says she doesn't mind what skill she gets as long as she can stay close to him. She's a little nervous though, because nobody knows what skill they'll get until they eat the fruit. Light, however, stays confident, telling her they'll both end up with amazing skills. As they walk through the village, the bright morning sun makes everything feel magical, and people wave and wish them luck, making the moment even more special. When they finally arrive at the church, the Holy Sister greets them warmly and starts explaining how the skill fruits work. She says that eating a fruit will grant a unique skill and open the door to a job that matches the skill, which could lead to a bright future. She even jokes about how it's a better deal than paying off student loans. Light and Lena stand before a table laden with glistening fruits, their eyes wide with excitement and a touch of apprehension. They're about to embark on a life-altering journey, a single choice that will shape their destinies forever. They understand the gravity of their decision. Each fruit holds the key to a unique and powerful skill. But there's a crucial rule, a stark warning from the Holy Sister. Only one fruit can be consumed. Eating a second will have fatal consequences, a lesson learned from countless others who succumbed to greed. Lena, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, carefully selected a vibrant crimson fruit. As she took a bite, a wave of pure energy surged through her, a blinding light momentarily obscuring her vision. When she could see again, the world seemed to shimmer with newfound clarity. A tingling sensation spread through her limbs, and she felt an unfamiliar power coursing through her veins. The Holy Sister, observing Lena's transformation with a knowing smile, realized this was the fruit of the legendary Sword Saint, a skill that would undoubtedly make Lena a formidable warrior. It is incredibly rare, so she never thought she would get to see someone acquire it in person. But now that Lena is officially a Sword Saint, she is destined to become one of the greatest adventurers in the country. Light is really happy for Lena, so he congratulates her on her amazing skill. But it's his turn next, so he steps up to the altar and picks a skill fruit for himself. He knows he probably won't get something as good as the Sword Saint's skill, but he's still hoping to acquire a decent combat skill so he can fight by Lena's side. However, as he takes a bite and the skill flows into his body, he's disappointed to hear that he's just a nutting master. The sister tries to be as supportive as she can, but yeah, the only fighting Light's going to be doing is against the pests out in the field. Light is devastated that his dreams of being an adventurer have been ruined, so he asks if he can try again. But the sister was very clear about the 100% fatality rate, so she's not letting him eat another fruit. Lena tries to cheer Light up and tells him she'll stay in the village and grow fruits with him since she doesn't care what she does as long as they are together. But the Holy Sister won't stand for all this love and compassion BS. Lena's Sword Saint skill is a once-in-a-decade marvel, so she's not going to let her waste that talent by becoming a farmer. She demands that Lena become an adventurer for the sake of this country. And, in fact, she'll be taking her to the royal capital immediately so she can begin her training there. Lena, feeling powerless, allows the Holy Sister to take her away. Before she leaves, she promises Light that she will return to him someday. 3 months have passed and Light has adapted to his new life. He uses his special ability to grow giant nuts, hoping to sell them at the market. However, to his disappointment, his giant nuts are still quite small, and he receives very little money for his efforts. Light tries his best to focus on his work and push thoughts of Lena out of his mind. As he is walking back to his house, he notices a poster with some news about Lena. She's apparently been promoted to S rank in the 3 months since she left the village and is doing incredibly well for herself. Of course, he is happy for her, but hearing about how well she's doing just makes him feel like an absolute failure. Even though he knows that he doesn't have the skill to become an adventurer, Light has been training every day in hopes that he might naturally unlock a sword skill or something. He repeatedly strikes at a tree stump, and he believes that if he can split it in half with a sword, then he will be strong enough to become an adventurer by his own merit. However, hard work doesn't always pay off, so the only thing he got from all that training was some bruised wrists. He falls to the floor in defeat and begins wondering if Lena still remembers him. She said she would come back for him, but with all the fame and fortune she has acquired, he wouldn't be shocked if she had forgotten his name and face altogether. Just then, a little girl named Ayla walks up to Light and says she brought him a cup of water. She's pretty much an orphan, and the village chief didn't want to deal with her, so he kinda just left her on Light's doorstep one day. Light saw that she had nowhere to go, so he decided to take her in, and the two have been living together ever since. Ayla tells him she's done with dinner, so if he wants to, he can come inside to eat, and Light happily obliges. Light takes a bite of the delicious stew Ayla prepared. As they eat, Ayla casually asks him about his day at the farm. Light explains that his profits have increased since he started focusing on growing special skill fruits. He remembers to warn Ayla, don't eat any of the fruits in those boxes marked with skull emojis. They're dangerous. Ayla, unaware of the danger, confesses that she used some of those special fruits to make the stew they are currently enjoying. Light panics, frantically asking if she's sure she used those specific fruits. Ayla confirms that she did, and the room falls silent as the gravity of the situation sinks in. And from what the Holy Sister said, eating a second skill fruit is a guaranteed death sentence. All of a sudden, Light's body begins to feel hot. He feels a pain in his chest, so he believes this is how he will die. He falls to the floor, and in his final breath, he apologizes to Ayla because this is his fault for expecting her to understand the labels when she doesn't know how to read yet. However, as he lies there and awaits death, Light realizes death is taking an awfully long time, so he sits up, and to his surprise, he's perfectly fine. Ayla sees the confused expression on Light's face, so she asks him if he's fine. That's exactly why he's confused. He ate a second skill fruit, which should have been fatal. So why and how is he still alive? Just then, he gets a piercing headache and feels the power of a new skill rushing into his body. Just then, Ayla starts to feel a sharp pain in her body as well, and since she ate the stew, that must mean she's about to acquire a skill as well. All of a sudden, Ayla is able to see words floating in front of Light and reads out the info of his nut master skill. In addition to the ability to grow nuts, Light's skill also makes him immune to all nut poisons. Light is shocked and asks Ayla how she knows this, so she tells him she can see words floating in the air. Light realizes she must have acquired some sort of appraisal skill. Ayla keeps reading Light's information and sees that he has a second skill now, so she tells him that he possesses an ability called Sword God. The Sword God skill greatly increases Light's attack power when he's holding a sword, as well as greatly increasing his magic resistance. If what Ayla said is true, then this might mean that his dream can finally come true, so Light wants to test it out for himself. He runs outside with his sword and goes back into the forest to see if he really has a new sword skill. He raises his sword, and with a single swing, he slashes the tree stump in half, as well as that of the bigger tree behind it. So it's safe to say that as of this moment, Light is OP. The next day, he heads out into town so he can go to the guild and finally become an adventurer. He is really excited since he has always dreamed of coming here, and the first thing he spots is the notice board full of bounty quests. If they successfully complete a quest, then they'll be able to buy new equipment and tasty food. Light has come to town not just to sell his nuts, but also to test the limits of his Sword God skill in a real combat situation. He believes that a successful quest will prove his worth and allow him to become an official adventurer. He tells Ayla to wait for him on a bench while he heads to the guild to accept a quest. While he's gone, Ayla decides to use her appraisal skill on the other adventurers in the guild hall. She's amazed by the variety of skills she discovers, from super strength to the ability to control the weather. However, she's also shocked by some of the useless skills she encounters, like the man with a skill that deals self-damage. Just then, she hears a commotion over by the front desk. So she looks over and finds Light in the middle of an argument with one of the adventurers in the guild. The man recognizes Light as the guy who's always selling his nuts in market, so he mocks him and says a loser like him doesn't belong in the guild. But Light completely ignores him and just tells Ayla that they can leave now. The guy is offended that Light would dare to ignore him, so his completely normal reaction is to attack Light with his sword. Light's Sword God skill also improves his reflexes, so he was easily able to block the attack. But the guy had no idea Light could do that, so he fully intended to catch a murder charge today. The guy's friends see that Light is capable of defending himself, so they convince Jan to just walk away because this isn't a fight he can win. Jan tries to play off his outburst and claims he never really intended to hurt Light, so he and his friends leave the guild to go on their first mission. And shortly after, Light and Ayla leave as well. Since Light has gotten the quest for them, they head out into the rocky plains, and Light is really excited since he might finally get to see a monster in person. But this place is dangerous, so he tells Ayla to stay close to him. They soon spot their target, and it's that slime monster over in the distance, so Light prepares himself to fight it. He cautiously approaches in an attempt to sneak up on it, but the slime notices him anyway, so Light goes for a full frontal assault instead. He is a lot stronger than he used to be, so when he charges at the slime, he slices it in half and accidentally splits the ground in the process. He's happy that his skill really is useful in battle, but he's going to have to work on his power management so he doesn't cause any more collateral damage. Ayla congratulates Light on his first successful quest, but to complete the quest, they need to cut the slime up and bring the parts back to the guild so they can exchange it for money. Ayla says she feels kinda bad about cutting the slime's body up, but Light reminds her that they'll earn enough money for pizza if they sell the slime parts. So Ayla throws her morals out the window and begins dissecting the slime. Just then, they hear someone yelling on the other side of the plains, so they rush over and find Jan and his party being attacked by a huge ogre. They intentionally picked an easy quest so they could just kill a slime and go home, but they never expected to run into an ogre. The ogre swings at them, and they all jump out of the way. But even if they manage to dodge that first attack, they stand no chance of winning against that thing. Light calls over to them to ask if they are alright, and as soon as Jan spots him, he comes up with a plan to escape. He and his friends start running straight at Light, and Light is a bit confused by what they are doing. Then they run past him, and he realizes they are trying to use him as bait so they can flee. The air crackled with anticipation as the ogre charged, its massive mace raised high. This was it, the moment of truth. Light braced himself, a thrill coursing through him. He knew this was a dangerous gamble. The Holy Sister had warned him repeatedly that his sword god skill only enhanced his offense, leaving his defense completely vulnerable. A single hit from the ogre could be fatal. But the thought of becoming the world's greatest adventurer, of proving himself worthy, fueled his resolve. He wouldn't back down. This was his chance to test the limits of his newfound power, to see if he truly had what it takes to become a legend. He has finally gotten used to his body's new strength, so Light jumps into the air, and as the ogre tries to strike him, he slashes its mace in half. No matter what it takes, he will make sure he catches up to Lena so the two of them can be together again. So in one swift motion, he brings his sword down and cuts the ogre cleanly in half, all while Jan and his friends watch from a nearby hill. A little while later, Light returns to the guild to exchange his items for money, but the receptionist finds it hard to believe that he managed to defeat an ogre all by himself. As proof, Light shows her the ogre horn he brought back, and on top of that, Jan's friends say they saw the whole thing, so they can guarantee that Light is telling the truth. The receptionist believes him, so she asks him to wait a minute so she can get his reward. And in the meantime, Jan's friends thank Light again for saving them. Just then, a crowd forms at the front of the guild, so Light asks if something happened, and Jan informs him that the S-rank party has just returned. This happens to be the S-rank party that Lena joined, and this is the first time he has seen her in the last 3 months. So Light goes up to her and tries to say hello, but in response, Lena says, "I've never met this man before in my life."
Our nerdy MC, Hiraku, wakes up earlier after dreaming of his death in his world. He goes out and greets everyone, noting that he didn't expect to ever live such a dream life. As a soul, MC faces the god that watches over the world. The god notes that he lived 39 years, but he had a cruel fate. He was betrayed by others and then fell ill with a terminal disease. The god decides to give him a second chance with a body that won't fall ill. The god finds it's his mistake for his awful life and wants to apologize and asks him if he has any wish he can also grant him. Thinking for a bit, Hiraku states he wants to try farming. He watched a show about it while he was sick and he wishes to try it. Additionally, he isn't good at getting along with others and wants to go farming somewhere where there aren't many people. The god states farming isn't his jurisdiction, but makes a call and arranges the things. He gets permission from the agriculture god to bestow upon Hiraku the power of the almighty farming tool. Hiraku wakes up in a forest and is happy to be healthy and be able to move again. He decides to start his farming life there and wonders how to use the almighty farming tool. The tool magically appears in his hand and Hiraku starts digging, noting that he isn't getting tired at all. He likes how soft the soil is and notes he can grow good vegetables there. Hiraku then realizes he first needs to worry about food and water and goes looking around. He sees a big tree and decides to make it a landmark and use it as a camp. He goes around looking for a river, but is unable to find any source of water. Hiraku then decides to dig and find underground water. He summons his tool, which turns into a shovel, and soon after he started digging, he ends up finding water. While preparing the ground around the tree, Hiraku looks for food, but is unable to find anything. Hiraku then looks at a smaller tree which eventually will get in his way, and decides to chop it down now. He summons his tool as an axe and almost gets crushed by the tree as he ends up cutting it with a single swing. He turns his tool into a hatchet and then cuts the tree into pieces. Before he realizes it, it is getting dark, and he turns his tool into a magnifying glass, but the sun sets. Having no way to start a fire, he carves a hole into the large tree and hides inside. Hiraku cuts some plates and cups. He realizes the moon provides enough light for him to see, but then sees that there are 2 moons and guesses he must be in another world. In the morning, Hiraku continues to clear the ground around the large tree and cuts some more trees. He feels it's time to get something to eat, and at that moment a large monster rabbit attacks him. But Hiraku manages to kill it in a single swing with his tool. After eating it, he decides to make a toilet and digs a large hole with an entrance, a gas release hole, and a tree trunk as a seat. As he couldn't relax, he ends up creating a small cabin around the toilet seat. MC then proceeds cultivating the land and imagines what he could cultivate. As he is done, he realizes he doesn't have any seeds to plant anything. The next morning, he is surprised to see that some plants are already starting to grow, and wonders if it's due to the tool. He decides to build a wall and a ditch around the fields to protect them from the rabbits and other beasts. It takes him a few days to complete it, but he manages to kill another rabbit. The plants grow faster, and MC is hoping that they are something he can eat, and don't turn up being decorative flowers. Hiraku then builds a hut, but as he has a hard time lifting the wood up, he digs inside of it, to give himself more vertical space. One day, he sees 2 dogs outside. As they look a bit rough and not aggressive, he invites them in and gives them some meat from a boar he just killed and wondered what to do with all that meat. He notices that one of them is pregnant, and after they ate, she started having birth pain. Hiraku realizes she is giving birth and wonders what to do. He ends up letting them stay in his house, while he goes back into the hole for the night. In the morning, he checks on the dogs and sees that the female gave birth to 4 dogs. He gives them some more meat to celebrate it. Hiraku believed the dogs would leave after that, but they decided to hang around. As they like the hut, Hiraku decides to build himself a new house. Hiraku ends up growing some tomatoes and enjoys them. The dogs do some hunting and protect the premises for Hiraku. He decides to name them Kuro and Yuki, male and female. The small ones he names Kuroichi, Kuroni, Kurosan and Kiroyan. MC wants to build a storehouse, more vegetables and many other things. Elsewhere, a girl wants to cross the mountain, but a man tells her it's dangerous and as she heard of the forest of death. The other side of the mountain is known like that, and it's because it's full of monsters. God decides to check on Hiraku on how he is doing as he is sorry for giving him a life fit for a sinner. As he checks on him, he realizes he put him in a dangerous forest known as Forest of Death, as realizes he made a mistake yet again. Hiraku had realized that while preparing the ground for farming, if he wishes to plant certain plant, that plant magically starts growing. Hiraku is happy with his life and knows it's thanks to the gods that bestowed it to him. He makes some statues of the 2 gods so that he can thank them. Hiraku decides to try planting some fruits. While they grow, he plays with the dogs, realizing that without them he would feel much more lonely. As the dogs also help him find his way back to his camp, Hiraku is able to travel further into the forest and eventually finds a river. He decides to make a tunnel and get water to his place, but since it's a 30-minute walk distance, he will be digging for a while and decides to first make a toilet near the river. Hiraku figures that if he turns his tool into a wheelbarrow, he can run around with it and not get tired because of the tool. Hiraku also expanded his crop fields, adding more veggies. He grows soybeans and wants to eat them, but doesn't have salt. Time passes and the weather starts to get cold. Seeing snow in the mountains, Hiraku wonders how cold it gets here. He decides to start preparing for the winter and gathers some food and wood. A giant spider shows up, however it's friendly and makes a handkerchief for Hiraku. The spider then decides to live in the large tree and loves eating potatoes. In exchange, the spider makes him clothes using the animal pelts Hiraku gives him. Gaining cloth, Hiraku feels more civilized as he now has a good bed, curtains and clothes. Hiraku decides to name the spider Zabuton. The winter starts. Zabuton no longer comes down the tree and Hiraku guesses he is hibernating. Hiraku feels a bit lonely, but finally the summer comes. The small dogs had grown up and one day they left, however they soon returned with partners. Soon, Zabuton showed up as well and also had kids. As there are now more mouths to feed, Hiraku decides to expand his crops again. Zabuton rings the alarm and Kuro leads Hiraku into the forest. Kuro takes him to a child girl who is naked and entangled in a spiderweb. The dogs and spiders are wary of her, but as she asks for help, Hiraku decides to help her. As he gets close, she jumps and bites his neck and then grows up into a young woman. Hiraku wonders if she is a monster. The dogs then attack her and as they beat her up, she turns into a small girl again. Hiraku wonders if she is their enemy as she sucked his blood, but the girl explains she isn't, and she had to do it to recover her strength. As she used too much energy, she can't maintain her adult form and clothes. Hiraku wonders why the dogs attacked them, and she explains she wanted to take one of them. Feeling bad for her, Hiraku lets her suck more of his blood so that she can recover. Hiraku takes her to his place. The girls are surprised to see a crop field in the forest, but also so many new crops. Hiraku gives her a tomato, and she ends up enjoying it and wants to try some other crops as well. The girl reveals her name is Rururushi, a vampire, and is excited to be able to try so many new veggies. Ru explains she is researching medical plans and ran away as she got in a fight with some nobles, who tried to steal her research. Since they kept chasing her and she heard of this forest, she decided to hide in it for a while until things calmed down, but also hoped to find some new plants to inspect. She is surprised that Hiraku is living in this dangerous forest and even tamed the beasts. He is also using some strange magic which allows him to create some tools, all of which excites her even more. Hiraku realizes how rare his chance is as this is the first person he came in contact with. As it may take even more to meet someone else, Hiraku decides to ask Ru to stay and live with him. Ru tries to explain that there are people after her, and she is a vampire, but Hiraku doesn't care. Hiraku explains he came here to live alone as he can't deal with people, but now realized he doesn't want to live alone and isn't sure how much more he can handle. Ru agrees, explaining that she doesn't really have a place to go, although she feels embarrassed by his proposal. The next morning, Ru turns a little younger. Hiraku wonders why and she explains that in this form, he will restrain himself from touching her and Hiraku agrees. Hiraku explains he wants to grow some sweet potatoes next. He also tells that Ru is the first villager. Kuro disagrees and Hiraku then corrects himself stating she is more like the 30th villager. Ru wonders if Hiraku can grow some medical herbs, MC agrees to try. Ru states they need to find somehow the right seeds, but Hiraku states he doesn't need seeds. The story continues onward with a brand new day. Hiraku enjoys the morning breeze and looks forward to another day of farming. While he's the ideal of a morning bird, Ru wakes up as well, still acting drowsy and tired, the perfect ideal of a night owl. This also makes sense as Ru is a vampire, so they are not fond of the mornings. Despite that, Hiraku still enjoys having Ru living with him as she has helped him tremendously in various ways, like setting up lights with her magic, helping Hiraku mine the right places for salt, and embarrassing him in the process because he passed by the salt while digging many times. For today's agenda, the two will check on how the fruit trees are growing. Ru looks forward to that, but needs to freshen up first, then she'll meet him there. The two see the trees and observe that the trees are growing as expected. Ru asks Hiraku if he transplanted the trees to the soil here, and he did because the fruit trees need more time to grow than the vegetables. Hiraku shares that the fruit trees he planted are orange and peach, and he hopes to plant chestnut trees sometime in the future. Rue shows her support for Hiraku by looking forward to seeing how the fruit trees turn out when it's time to harvest. The two spend their time peacefully outside by drinking Rue's herb teas. Hiraku enjoys the herb teas Rue makes, but does prefer green tea instead. Hiraku remembers a fun fact that oolong and black tea are all made from processing the same leaves. But the drinking time has cut short, as there is an announcement made long away, prompting Hiraku and Rue to come to see what's the matter. After running to the sounds of the alarm, the two see an angel bound and defenseless against a pack of wolves. The angel desperately apologizes to the pack of wolves for attacking them first, pissing them off in the process. Hiraku looks at this situation as déjà vu, as the angel screams for them two to help her, and they have no choice but to help. After freeing the angel from her restraints, she uses her magic to clean herself up and give her a cleaner appearance apart from her ragged clothes. She then quickly notices Rue and identifies her correctly as she explains that she was trying to find Rue and take her back with her. As the angel screams her voice, she was then attacked again by a pack of wolves. After saving the angel for a second time, the three have a talk at Hikaru and Rue's residence, so they can break the ice as strangers. The angel ridicules Rue for choosing the forest to hide in out of all places, as the angel did not enjoy her experience as she immediately got ambushed by wolves. Rue sympathizes as that is the same experience she went through her first time entering the forest. In fact, Rue learned the hard way that the wolves are resistant to magic, that is even if you manage to hit them, which is unlikely. This seems to be the one thing they can get along at, how they almost got ended by the wolves as magic users. The angel asks Rue who is the man with her, and she introduces her to Hikaru, her husband. The angel is surprised after seeing Rue's blushed expression after saying that Hikaru is her husband, and looks at Hiraku to confirm what she says was true. Hiraku does say that Rue is right, and the angel was honestly not expecting that. Neither did Hiraku, as this was the first time Rue has called Hiraku her husband. The angel forgets to introduce herself and tells Hiraku that her name is Tia, an angel obviously. Hiraku asks if that means Tia serves God, and she proudly accepts that as a symbol of pride. But Rue calls Tia out, and says that Tia's race is simply a warrior that is more muscle-brained than one who is clever or intelligent. Tia defends herself as there was a brief period when angels were considered an object of worship. Hiraku asks a question, why is Tia chasing down Rue? Tia answers that there is a bounty on Rue because of all the damage she caused in town when she went on a rampage. Rue admits her crimes are true but tries to shift the blame onto a snob noble because they wanted to keep forcing Rue to make medicine and drugs for them. Their list of demands kept on piling up so much, Rue felt like she needed to teach them a lesson. But Tia reveals a personal flaw within Rue, her short temper. She always spends her time researching strange medicines and concoctions, so if something minor bothers her, she becomes a megaman and starts explosions. Rue argues back that it was only an accident, and Tia is being overdramatic. But Tia restates her original claim that she shouldn't have blemished the noble name by causing havoc upon the town because of her own personal problems. The drama becomes lighter as Rue starts becoming more humble and admits her faults, and how she's in this situation because she was trying to run away from Tia, who is stronger than her. She also admits that the first sign she saw the limit of her strength was when fighting the wolves. Rue comes up with an idea and asks Tia if she wants to live here with them in the forest. Rue gives Tia a tour around the crop fields and the orchard, and introduced her to Zabuton, the spide. Tia may not like spiders as she immediately faints after meeting Zabuton. Tia asks if she'll have to do farm work, and she complains why an angel like her should dirty her hands doing commoner work like farming. Hiraku helps Tia harvest the crops and helps her learn that farming may be fun. After a long day of hard work, Tia rewards herself by trying a strawberry and finds it very sweet and delicious. After getting to experience a typical day of farming, Rue asks Tia again if she wants to stay with them, pressuring her that she can handle the work on her own. Tia agrees, and the trio spends quality time farming, trying out the foods they harvested, and Tia shows off her magic by summoning a golem to carry the hard lumber while Rue uses her telekinesis magic to carry them. Rue commends Tia for being able to quickly adapt to farming life. Tia asks if Hiraku is considering expanding their crops, but he mentions that they're operating at full capacity, so there would be no time to harvest them unless they have more people to help with the harvest. Even if they can harvest all of that as a team of 3, there's another problem with how they'll be able to eat all those foods on their own without wasting them. Hiraku then sees the new puppies and how their horns are growing. It turns out that Kuro and Yuki's puppies also had puppies, so overpopulation may be a problem. To fix this, Hiraku expanded his land to build a dog area. His worry is that there are so many puppies, he may not be able to give out and remember all the puppies' names. But for Zabutan's children, her children spun web parachutes to fly with the wind and explore their new lives on their own. In addition, Tia also says that she will leave for a few days, but does promise to return. She did keep her promise, as when she returned, she came with 7 high elves. As the elves make their introductions, Hiraku observes that they are all related, and the elves wish to live with him, Rue, and Tia in the forest. Tia shares their sad backstory of how they used to have a home, but many of them were sent out to their deaths in the War of Humans. Now that their race is scattered, they could not find a proper home to call their own. Tia supports this idea, as she said that they could help him with farming. Hiraku allows this as long as they are all able to get along. But first off, Rue introduces the elves to Zabutan, and they faint right after. Rue also introduces the elves to the dogs, and they faint a second time. It seems that Rue enjoys seeing people's reactions after showing them to beasts that are somehow tamed. Now that everyone knows each other, Hiraku needs to build more homes for his new friends. The elves work on building a big house for them to live together. So they started by making a ditch and wooden fence, and next building their own toilet and garbage disposal area. Then the elves start to build the house from the bottom up, and it turns out that they know a lot about construction. So Hiraku helped them by digging holes, leveling the ground, and gathering lumber for them. The outcome was a big success, and it was so extraordinary. Hiraku grows a bit jealous of the little hut he calls home. Inside the big house, when a person enters, they see the living room that also doubles as a dining room, so the elves could work on things together or eat together. On the far left and right sides of the house are storage areas. The second floor is where their individual rooms are. All lighting across the house is controlled by magic. Looking atop the second floor at the happy elves, Rue and Tia, brings a smile to Hiraku's face, hoping that this could be a home where the elves can feel safe and at peace, like they always wanted. When the elves try farming, they quickly adapted to it as they enjoy doing the labor of a farmer. When Hiraku talks with Ria, the leader of the elves, so he can learn more about them, he finds out that they use fire and eat meat. He is shocked by this because he always thought that elves are one with nature, not relying on fire that can hurt the forest. Someone who rises at sunrise and sleeps at sunset, someone who eats berries and fruits from the forest, and someone who is a tree hugger and does not like to wear anything metallic like armor. Ria lectures Hiraku to not follow that stereotype and to stop thinking that the forest is a heaven land, as Mother Nature can be crueler than one believes. But Ria does want to thank Hiraku again for allowing them to live with him, and he feels the same way thanks to how helpful and resourceful they are. The elves continue to show their capabilities by building a furnace to do blacksmithing and baking foods like bread. As everyone is enjoying the bread that the elves made, Hiraku feels motivated to expand his wheat fields, but he asks Rue if his home's land is someone's property, even though it should have been asked a long time ago. It turns out that the land may belong to the demon lord. Rue reassures Hiraku that since his home and settlement were not supported by outside factors, the property can be claimed as his thanks to his self-sufficiency. Later in the evening, Rue, Tia, and Ria start having a conversation about Hiraku and comment on how incredible he is. A human who was able to tame all those inferno wolves and a demon spider. Ria wonders if the soil that he planted all his crops on is capable of producing the high-quality products they have made all this time. But Rue doesn't know how to answer that, as she never asked him that question. Tia chuckles at how one of his weaknesses is his lack of knowledge about this world, as he always thought of elves as a race that didn't use fire or eat meat. Not only that, but Hiraka doesn't know much about angels either after meeting Tia. If he doesn't know much about those races, it may be a possibility that he may not know more about the other various races in this world. They call him a mysterious fellow as despite his lack of knowledge about their world, he is capable of doing magnificent things like befriending violent beasts, something not an ordinary person could dream of accomplishing. As the girls continue talking throughout the night, Hiraka spends his time crafting more wooden dining utensils. As he finished on his cup, he then has a thought about how he hasn't progressed on building a waterway yet. Sometime in the road, he will have to build that waterway, especially if the population in his land will increase. Now that he has more help from the elves, maybe building that waterway can now be a possibility. But for now, he goes to sleep as he knows he'll need the energy for what tomorrow brings for him. Morning rises, and Hiraka takes advantage and heads to plow the fields. As he summons a gardening tool, he is greeted by his demon spider, Zabuton. Hiraka asks Zabuton what's the matter, and he points to what he caught, a giant bee. Hiraka asks if Zabuton will eat its prey, but Zabuton has other ideas. Instead, Zabuton wishes to keep it as a pet. Although it may not be wise to have a bee that is the size of a human as a pet, as humans already freak out when a bee passes by them that is the size of a coin. But Zabuton reassures Hiraka that the bee will no longer pose a threat as it has promised to behave and not fight back. Now that Zabuton added a new member to the family, Hiraka can now start to do his daily work as a farmer. Hiraka started out by building a little house for the bees' nest near the orchard. The bees make themselves at home as they were able to build a big nest inside in about 10 days. That is thanks to the workaholic worker bees building their new home that quickly. But something seems odd to Hiraka. The worker bees are average-sized, but only the queen bee is the most gigantic one out of all of them. But no matter. Hiraka has an idea. If he could leave the bees in the little house, he could possibly harvest the honey that they will produce, but they would need to pollinate first. The crops in the fields do have flowering plants, but Hiraka would need to plant a flower garden nearby the bees for easier access. As of now, Hiraka is a farmer, a landowner, and a beekeeper. Tia comes to see what Hiraka's up to, only to fly away in fear of the bees. Hiraka doesn't seem to mind them. In fact, he seems unfazed as the bees are literally on his body without a beekeeper's suit. Maybe he's built differently. It isn't surprising after all the things he's done before. Hiraka then moves on to dig up a huge hole. When Ria stops by and asks Hiraka what he's making this time, he said that he's building a reservoir, or at least he hopes it will be one day. Hiraka's plan is to draw water from the river through a waterway, but he's been pretty busy with other stuff so he never came around to building it. Ria asked Hiraka what is his progress so far in building that reservoir, and he admitted that he hasn't even reached far enough to decide what he's going to make it out of yet, so he's nowhere close to finished. After taking note of the geography of Hiraka's land, he sees that there is a distance between his land and the river. But now back to the reservoir materials, he always thought that waterways were made out of stones. However, since he lives in a forest, he would have a hard time finding stones. There is a surplus of trees, so maybe he could make it out of wood. That could work, but the problem is that since it is a long waterway, the gaps in the wood will cause a lot of leakages. Hiraka has an idea. He compacted dirt using the almighty farming tool, and it is as hard as concrete, so this will be a good alternative solution. This solution is greater than expected. Since Hiraka removed a lot of dirt to make that big hole in the ground, he now has a surplus of it. So, Hiraka puts the dirt to use and went into mass production mode, creating more parts of the reservoir to connect with each other. As a plus, Hiraka built an intake gate for the water at the top of the waterfall. When he built the foundation using dirt, he also placed the parts for the waterway on top of that. The elves help with this project by handling the basic foundation work. As the elves do that, Hiraka focuses on sealing the seams and fortifying the foundation. And thanks to the power of teamwork, the construction was completed a lot faster than Hiraka initially expected. They test out their new reservoir, and they see their creation sending water their way, so it worked. With this new feature, they don't have to climb in and out of the well for water every day, not to mention, watering down the crops will now be easier for everyone too. A fish gets caught by the reservoir and lands on Hiraku's land. Now that Hiraku has access to the river, he can now be able to eat fish, but he would need to find out how he'll prepare his new meal. In the forest, the rabbits can be very vicious, which is unlike them as they're low on the food chain, but the fish seem very normal. Or so he thought until one of the fish tries to attack Hiraku. Remember, never underestimate fish as they're underestimated in the real world, the Pokemon world, and this world is no exception. Anyway, Hiraku grills the aggressive fish, but Rue and Tia show concern that since the fish came from the Forest of Death, would it be safe to eat? When Hiraku offered the grilled fish to everyone, they all insist he should eat it as he was the one who cooked it. Hiraku tries a piece of fish, and he loves it. The taste reminds him of salmon, and he encourages Rue and Tia to try it too. The two do give it a shot, and they're amazed by how good it is. This also prompts the elves to want to eat some too. Luckily enough, there is enough fish to go around, so they had a feast. Hiraku goes back to work, and he wants to experiment with something. He decided to try tilling with the hoe while thinking about rice plants, and rice plants suddenly popped up. He finds it interesting that they could grow in normal soil, and now that they have the waterways built into their land, Hiraku wants to try and make a rice paddy. Rue, Tia, and the elves don't know what a rice paddy is, so he wants to show them what it is. Hiraku digs a hole and releases water onto it. This makes the elves think that Hiraku is making a pond for the fish, but instead, he's actually rice planting. As a team, Hiraku and the elves were able to plant all the rice seeds onto the water crop. And to keep pests out, Hiraku assigned Zabuton's children to serve as the crop's protector. When the rice plants grew, everyone jumped for joy as they were able to harvest them. After drying the rice crops, they finally managed to bring the plants inside so they could be threshed. After that, they put the rice through a sieve to filter them away from the remaining leaves or plant matter. They then mortared to remove the husk from the rice and pestle to polish the rice. In short, this process has many steps that everyone found exhausting. Just when everyone thinks the rice is ready to eat, Hiraku disappoints them by saying that he would have to cook them, as if they haven't spent enough time growing the rice and doing procedures to filter them. Hiraku asks Rue to start a fire to cook the rice, and she finally gets excited because she could show off her powerful abilities. But no, Hiraku just wants a tiny flame, which ruins the vibe for Rue. Hiraku finally sees the result of his cooking, and the rice has been cooked. Rue asks if the rice is finally done, and Hiraku says not yet. Like, come on? At this point, even the viewer is getting tired from this long monologue. Hiraku molds the rice into a small ball, and then gives it to Rue and Tia to try them. Tia feels hesitant, so she tells Rue to try it first. Rue reluctantly tries it and feels overjoyed at the taste of it. Tia tries it and she also agrees with how good the rice is, along with Ria. This made the endless waiting session worth it, and Hiraku is proud of his work. But it came back to bite him because when he wanted to try one, the rest of the rice patties were taken by the other elves, addicted to how delicious they are. Sometime later, Hiraku and the elves were done working on the water crops, so as Hiraku dries himself off, he sees how the elves could easily cleanse themselves with magic. This prompts Hiraku to start his next project, building a bathhouse. The elves ask why not use the river to bathe themselves instead. Hiraku admits it is a good idea, but they will get hypothermia if it's the winter season. But it isn't about building a bathhouse for Hiraku to get clean faster. Hiraku wants to build one because he wants everyone to experience what a bathhouse feels like. Hiraku's ambitious vibe is enough for the elves to agree to help him. Construction began, and everyone focused on building a furnace, modifying the waterways to reach their way to the bathhouse, and building a bathtub to fit as many people as possible, along with making stools too. This will not be a private, but a communal bathhouse, so many people can enjoy it at the same time. The construction is almost complete, but Hiraku realizes a flaw in his plan. Although he can use the river water for the bathhouse, he is concerned that he will pollute the river if he sends his wastewater back. As a solution, Tia suggests he uses slimes to eat the waste products and purify the water so it's safe to give back to the river. Tia flies away to find some slimes and comes back with small harmless ones. Hiraku then builds a purification pool for the slimes in the waste waterway. Although Tia suggests also putting the slimes in the toilet, Hiraku agrees it'll be useful, but he feels uncomfortable doing his business in front of an audience. The furnace needs some firewood, so Hiraku goes to gather some, only to see that mushrooms have been growing on top of them. Although he is hesitant to try mushrooms because he isn't sure which are edible or not, he also remembers the girls eating them in the past, so he distracts himself by growing all the mushrooms he knows. The bathhouse is complete, and Hiraku explains to the girls how to use it, but they prefer a demonstration. They see Hiraku use the bathhouse, and seeing his relaxed expression was enough for them to try it out too. But Hiraku finds it awkward to bathe with people of the opposite gender, so he may consider building a bathhouse for men, but the elves dismiss that because it'll mean he gets a private bath to himself. The next day arrives, and another 5 elves come to the village seeking refuge. Hiraku invites the 5 elves to his growing community, and due to the elves' stability inside their new home, they make a goal to revive their race, including making children. How they plan to do that is up to the imagination. Now the focus has shifted from Hiraku's point of view to Kuro's instead. Before Kuro found Hiraku, he didn't have a name of his own. From his birth, Kuro spent his life inside the forest of death alone. He always found himself in fights and gained a reputation for having a flawless winning streak among male wolves. He lived the bachelor's life and enjoyed life as he pleased until he met a female wolf who he fought and then lost. After his loss, he joined the female wolf's travels and eventually grew intimate enough to start a family. To live a life leading a pack of his offspring was something Kuro didn't mind, but they one day were attacked by a grappler bear, the king of the forest. For an unknown reason, the bear spared their lives. It was a lucky break, but the wolves were too injured to continue hunting for food, thus they were eventually driven out by their former prey. When all hope seems lost, he finds a human male who took them in, and that is Hiraku. Kuro was hesitant at first because he thought Hiraku was weak, but Hiraku had a great aura of power within him, convincing Kuro to join him. Hiraku would feed and raise the wolves as if they were his family, and they are. This kindness gained Kuro's trust and loyalty toward his new master. Kuro was grateful to be let into a kind home where his children could grow up, and as Kuro's family grows, Hiraku's family starts to grow too as Ru, Tia, Ria, and the elves found their way into his family circle. Although Kuro respects Hiraku, he pities how Hiraku doesn't understand that he has been raising inferno wolves, a terrifying monster species, in his backyard. But that doesn't matter because Hiraku has proven himself to be a strong individual and a great leader. The story starts with the completion of their new house. Hiraku, Ru, Lia, and Hakuran are outside taking in the great structure they've worked so hard on. Hiraku had to dig an entire cellar out and use massive trees as supports, but with his almighty farming tool, everything was done in record-breaking time. While working, he had an inkling of what it'd be like, but still. Even now, he can't help but be impressed with what they've managed to build. Hakuran and Ru had all contributed during the design, making it the best they could. As Leah says, it just wouldn't feel right if he didn't have the nicest house here. They go to tour the interior. The main hall is incredibly spacious and has several large tables set out for eating or just hanging out. Magical lights are set at regular spaces over the ceiling, and sets of stairs on either side lead up to the upper floors. Everyone can gather here to chill and hang out. To the left is MC's room, the largest personal room in the entire building. They have a kitchen in the back and stoves outside, as well as a specified dining room. The cellar is used for storage, while the upstairs has the girls' rooms. Everyone has their own room, which makes the girls relieved, since everyone was getting crowded with all the people joining the farming community. They had so many people on the farm that Stalin would have been proud. MC heads to a nearby room and notices it has a lock from the outside only. Strange. When he opens it, he sees a single large bed inside. Oh. I'll just pretend I didn't see that. Their tour finished, and the group heads down, where MC looks outside and sees the great tree. He's happy with the way things turned out. After they spend the winter there, Leah offers to do renovations if anyone has any suggestions. MC goes and brings over a god statue as well as statues of his dogs. They would be placed at the entrance to the new house. A while later, MC is preparing dinner and seeing if he can do something new. Hakuren and Ru appear, asking him what he's making, and he tells them he's planning to make curry. The girls haven't heard of it, so he explains it to them. It's easy to make but takes a long time to master. Usually, he says, he just add Ru to the pot and cook it that way. This makes Ru very anxious, since she thinks he's talking about her. She calls him a savage. When the girls go outside to check out the fields, they notice a lot of new plants. MC has used his tool to grow plants not normally in season. They go and harvest spices they'll need for the curry. First is cumin, which the girls find quite cute. It's dried out now, but that's because once the flower has dried up, what's left behind is what gives it such a signature aroma. Ru takes a whiff. What a peculiar smell, she says. The next ingredient is turmeric, which is the main ingredient for giving curry its color. The plant itself is huge, but the harvested parts are the segments underground, which need to be dried out. The girls try to dry it out by doing funny chants around them, which not so surprisingly doesn't work. Magic, however, gets the job done. The next ingredient is coriander, which resembles small brown onions on a thin branchy stem. The seeds are ground up into powder, which has a nice and fresh fruit-like aroma. The leaves on top are called cilantro, which likewise has a very potent aroma that gets the dogs excited. They take a whiff before running away. MC shrugs and takes a bite for himself, remarking, "Looks like we have different tastes after all." Hakuren and Ru take note, since that plant was apparently capable of driving off infernal wolves. It might be worth researching. MC also picks up black pepper and cayenne peppers. These would be all the spices they needed. But as he's standing there, he remembers a saying. Girls think guys who make their own curry from scratch are a pain. He wonders if it's true. After gathering all the ingredients, he prepares to make dinner. Leah shows up to help him, with the others too busy making a certain magical amulet. The process of making curry has many steps. First, they heat up the rapeseed oil they've extracted. Then they add rabbit meat. While it's cooking, they grind up all the spices except for the cumin into a powder. Once they get some color on the meat, they take it off to prevent it from overcooking. Leah asks if it's enough powder for all the meat, and he tells her it should be. After this, they cook the cumin in the leftovers from the meat, to bring out its aroma and flavor. He states it's important to make sure not to burn it. As the smoke rises up, Leah exclaims she's never smelled anything like this before. The next step is to saute the onions, ginger and garlic, again being careful not to burn them. After a little bit, they add the diced tomatoes and keep on sauteing it. While they're cooking, some other elves show up, wondering what the smell is. Leah offers to take over while he keeps directing her. Once the mix has turned into a nice paste, they move on to spices and salt. They cook it a little bit more before adding in the meat and boiled soybeans along with some water. While letting it simmer for a bit until the meat gets soft, they take the time to relax for a bit. Just then, MC realizes he's forgotten something. Naan. He considers how many portions he needs, which is a ton. You make naan by using the same recipe as regular bread, right up to where they let it rise. The difference is they now roll out the dough with a rolling pin. He hands it to Leah to take care of. Once done, they're supposed to cook it inside of the stove, but MC has seen people use the outside of a pot before, so he tries that. He places chunks all around the exterior while Leah looks on. Meanwhile, Ru is examining a piece of cilantro, remarking, "What an interesting plant this turned out to be. It's not poisonous apparently, but still has fascinating repellent effects against the wolves." They see several elves and dogs looking through some nearby bushes, and they go up to them. Everyone can smell something appetizing in the air. At last, MC and Leah are finished with their dish. The girls remark curry has a strange color and seem a bit hesitant, while MC shows them how to eat it with naan. You scoop it up and eat it kind of like a hot dog. Everyone likes it, and Rue considers researching it in the future. Soon, the girls are lining up for seconds, and MC fears he will have nothing left for himself. It's not the first time it's happened. Leah has even memorized the recipe by now, and she looks forward to making more in the future. The winter soon draws near and the group starts to make preparations. MC stocks up on logs and trades some food with the spider Zabuton for more warm blankets. As he carries a few crates back to the house, he sees Lou and Tia preserving some food for the winter using magic. They season the meat, smoke it, and then get it dried. After all, the dogs can't hunt well either, so he wants to stock up on as much meat as possible. MC himself is working on a way to preserve vegetables. He fills crates with vegetables, places a sheet on top, and then covers it with snow. This is called snow storage. The bottom boxes are left empty to let the water fall through and keep the vegetables dry. MC wishes he could use magic, seeing all the girls having that ability. Later at night, Rue teaches MC the basics of magic. He seems to take a fancy to Hakuren's golems, which makes Rue a bit jealous. Hiraku admits he's feeling a bit bad, since all he does is gardening and cooking, while the girls do amazing things with their magic. But Rue reassures him, saying simply living out here is more than most people can do. After all, nobody else except for him has done this before. As the moons rise high in the sky, the scene soon fades to winter, with thick layers of snow building up on every surface. They shovel snow onto the vegetable containers. Afterward, they retreat indoors, where MC crafts a reversi set as well as a chess and mahjong set for them to pass the time with. He spends some time explaining the rules. First up is reversi. You play with black and white tiles. When you surround an opponent's piece on two sides with your own pieces, you flip it to your own color. The game ends when the board completely fills up, and whichever player has the most colored pieces then wins. Rue remarks it's a simple game and sounds kinda boring, but Hakuren assures her the simple design allows for complicated strategies. MC compliments her for understanding this principle, which causes Rue to immediately challenge Hakuren to a match. The girls are quite fired up. They had a history together and were only on a temporary truce while living with MC, so they're eager to settle the score. The angel easily claps the vampire, making her throw a rage fit and toss the board, pretending to slip. However, Hakuren just uses a spell. It causes all the pieces and the board itself to fall back into place, undoing the reset. Control Z is quite powerful, isn't it? Looks like resetting won't work against Hakuren. This same event keeps repeating over and over, so MC leaves the room to watch the elves play reversi with each other. One of them is playing for Kuro, who taps the board with his paw wherever he wants a piece turned. Several other wolves are playing chess, surprisingly doing quite well. MC finds it cute, but senses a terrifying energy coming from them. He reminds himself not to challenge one of them in the future. Rue shows up, asking if the wolves' game is done. Shin then struts up and challenges one of them to a game before MC can warn her. And sure enough, she soon loses a game to Kuro and ends up shivering in a corner. Their next game is mahjong, which MC gets promptly destroyed in. In fact, he's the only one who ends with a massively negative score. Thus, Hiraka doesn't have any more points left. The game ends with an absolute sweep by Kuro. MC joins Rue in the corner. A while later, MC has also set up a mini bowling set, saying he's definitely not mad at mahjong or anything. They've painted each of the pins and given them a unique name, such as serial killer or bandit. After MC's turn, the girls prove themselves much more capable, easily getting good and knocking over all the pins with a single try. Over the winter, they entertain themselves with plenty of games, with Rue losing repeatedly to Kuro until she passes out on a table. They even have good food too. Soon enough, the snow melts and spring has come. MC steps outside, admiring the cozy weather. The girls join him, asking what he wants to do. He says it's time to wake Zabuton from her hibernation and also get their corn planted. But Zabuton starts the alarm, sending the group out to see a terrible creature heading straight at them. It's a wyvern! It spreads its massive wings and roars a challenge. The story continues after the appearance of the wyvern. Its arrival heralded by Zabuton's frantic alarms, the draconic creature descends upon the settlement, and Hiraku rushes out to meet it with Rue and Hakurin. The girls seem to take it very seriously, and an anxious MC swallows while looking up. Before their eyes, the wyvern spreads its wings and sends a blast of wind in the party's direction, roaring a defiant challenge. MC wonders if he should try and drive it away, or if he should just have the others stay low and hope it ignores them. But of course, his questions are soon answered for him as the dragon unleashes a fiery breath, intent on roasting them all into little bits of reptile food. Rue and Hakurin hold up their hands, casting a defensive spell to protect the settlement. A bubble forms around the entire area, but the blast still manages to break through. Chunks of molten rock and burning wood fall all around them, causing fires which the elves rush to put out. The party wonders if they should attack it, but they seriously doubt whether they could even break through the wyvern's defenses. MC thinks about abandoning the place and having everyone escape into the forest, but that wouldn't work since it would be able to just follow them from the sky. He wishes for the strength to protect others, and his farming tool transforms into a shiny golden spear. I guess spears can be used for farming, if you count farming monsters, of course. But MC doesn't dwell too long on this topic and instead wins himself back to chuck the spear at the wyvern. Fairy tale music plays in the background, so you know it's protagonist and friendship time. Hiraku's spear soars in a deadly arc directly at the monster, and it puts up several magical barriers in front of it. But this is an overpowered main character anime, so his attack breaks through and pierces its wing. The almighty farming tool then returns to MC's hand, and he throws it again. This time he nails the beast in its chest. He and the girls watch the wyvern fall out of the sky, stunned at what just happened. Nobody expected him to have so much power. MC heads out with his wolves to find its body, and they soon see it. They wonder if it's possible the creature was under someone else's control, but Hakurin tells him it's unlikely for someone to be able to both harness such a powerful creature, as well as consider it expendable enough to throw at them. Reassured, MC asks the next most logical question. Can you eat it? The answer somehow is yes. Apparently, there was once a king who sent his army into a den of wyverns to hunt them, and bring them back so he could have a taste. Of course, they all got burned to death and eaten by the creatures. But MC is too powerful, so he was able to easily defeat it and make it into several juicy meals. There's a round steak grilled with spices, breast meat steamed in leaves, and tail meat simmered in a stew with vegetables. The meat turns out so much more tender than they thought, even though a knife can't even pierce its skin. The broth is great too. The girls gather around, all enjoying their food. While eating, Rue asks if Hakurin would be able to block an attack from MC's spear. Not a chance, she says. The attack pierced a 3-layer barrier from a wyvern before blowing right through its chest. The girls think it was lucky they ran into Kuro and the rest of his pack when they first got here, rather than MC. Hiraku asks them what's wrong, and they just tell him they're glad to be in good health, and fate must have been smiling upon them. Speaking of smiles, or rather the lack of smiles, the scene shifts to the demonic kingdom of Galgardo and the demon lord's castle. News of the wyvern's defeat has reached them. 3 figures are sitting at a table, simply unable to comprehend what has just happened. Defeating just a single wyvern requires the mobilization of their entire military force. But this one was slain from the ground and killed in just 2 hits. The figures are 3 of the demon lord's 4 great generals, Bezel, Randon and Gratz. There's no way they could fight something like that. And they just got their yearly budget approved too. Randon throws his hands up, saying he would have to deal with their people panicking if the news spread, so he'd rather just resign now and let somebody else deal with it. The others shout at him to come back. The scene then shifts to the gatekeeper dragons and Drime's lair, where a giant blue dragon is speaking to Gucci, one of his attendants who, as the name suggests, is absolutely decked out. They both saw the incident unfold with their own eyes, and the dragon asks what he thinks would happen if he were to receive such an attack himself. It would most likely pierce cleanly through him. They decide it is too dangerous to attack or interfere in their business. With the world building done, the attention shifts back to MC. The wyvern meat was delicious, but there was still one thing missing from that meal: alcohol. This gets the elves excited, and everyone is excited to finally be able to get started. They do a quick harvest and build a large tub for them to crush the grapes, using their own bodies and large stirring sticks. Some of the elves are hesitant to step on something they'll have to drink, but I'm sure some of those grapes would love to be stepped on by. Well, let's move on. MC tells them they can switch out if they get tired, while he would be in charge of switching out the barrels. Lalasha had built them to be watertight to better hold the crushed grapes. The girls then get into the tub and start walking around clockwise, but Hakurin ends up getting her foot stuck and collides with one of the elves, knocking them both down into a fan service position. When she gets up, she remarks it would be easier to stay coordinated if they had a song. The elves exclaim they've got something. It's a song they used to sing from back in their village days, and with one of them in lead, the rest break into song and a rhythm soon break out. The juices start flowing and even Rue and MC get pushed in to join. Thus time passes. After an entire day's worth of work, they've got several barrels full of crushed grapes. The yeast on the skin of the grapes should ferment it for them, but perhaps they've made too much? In total, they got 16 barrels. From above, God and his daughter, the goddess of agriculture, are observing him, with God lamenting about how he messed up so much while trying to help MC. He tried to give him a good life, but accidentally sent him into the forest of death. And not only that, he also gave MC a replica of the Holy Lance Grime. Although Hiraku is only using it as a farming tool right now, it's extremely dangerous since it could drain all of his life force and kill him instantly. God says it's fine since MC was given extremely powerful regeneration abilities. Infinitely suffering and healing? But that just sounds like torture. I mean, enhanced interrogation techniques. War crimes aside, the agriculture goddess then gets to the main problem. Why is the statue MC made of her an old man? God fidgets nervously while his daughter scolds him, telling him to sit there for another 300 years to repent for his mistakes. Down below, while Zabuton makes another piece of cloth, she notices something and signals for the group to be on alert. MC takes out his spear and goes to investigate, only to find a little pointy-eared girl bound in spiderwebs. It gives MC a sense of déjà vu and it turns out to be Flora, Rue's younger sister. Apparently, Flora was looking for Rue after she heard her sister was being chased by a certain evil angel. Hakurin makes a scary face and Flora is shocked to see her here. She quickly tries to cover up her mistake and get her sister to help, but Rue is not forthcoming. MC offers for Flora to stay with them for a bit. After all, she just got there. Flora instead replies she can't believe MC is actually Rue's husband. Something feels off. But once Kuro gives her a funny look and Rue tells her about MC's accomplishments, she makes a cute noise and quickly apologizes. It's at this point that MC gets a display of the Inferno Wolf's abilities, having never realized this prior. That night, they give Flora a nice bowl of miso soup and give her a food lecture. Learning about microorganisms involved in fermentation gets her worked up and she leaves the next day, inspired. 1 month later, Flora returns with an entourage of maids as well as some normal cows. With milk, they would now have access to milk and cheese. And they would have cows too. Moving on. While watching the new arrivals, Hakurin realizes there's a lot of everyone, except for angels. She's alone. She tells MC she needs to leave for some time and returns later that night with her subordinates. The angels Gran Maria, Cudel and Caron. Daga the lizardman representative. And a chicken. Behold. A chicken. Description. It's just a normal chicken. Thanks to everyone here, things get a lot more civilized. The maids belong to a race of ogres and are quite professional, helping them get their chores done faster. It doesn't seem the maids know more sophisticated dishes, so MC teaches them, which gets them extremely interested in cooking. Despite their appearances and courteous behavior, they are also extremely strong and can carry a lot of things at once. The angels also contribute quite a bit, patrolling different regions of the forest from the air like fantasy attack helicopters. It turns out, after the wyvern attack, Hakurin thought it would be helpful to have some security around the area. Good idea! As for the lizard men, they helped out by doing a lot of physical labor and helping out with construction. But since they looked really similar, MC had their leader Daga tie a red scarf around his arm. The most pressing issue, however, is there would now be a ton of people here. Just as he finishes calculating the population, just like my math professor, Rhea shows up with more problems for him to do. The rest of the elves from their village have appeared, so MC goes to see them. Surprisingly, he catches on to the fact there aren't any male elves, and he asks Rhea about this. She replies there weren't many male elves that survived the attacks, having a quiet moment of mourning before declaring, "It's alright, since they'll just make more now." Not understanding, MC gives them a thumbs up and wishes them good luck. As they crowd around him, he decides not to ask them exactly what they mean. Back at the main hall, the representatives of all the races meet with MC to talk about a name for their farming settlement. At first, it was just his hut, but as more people showed up and settled around the area, it became an actual village. They consider a few ideas. Rue suggests naming it after MC. But like any normal non-narcissist, he thinks it would be weird to have a town named after him, and suggests they name it after the forest they're in, and MC asks her what the forest is called, only to be told it was called the Forest of Death. Naturally, this was a no-go since their village would be something like the Village of Death. As one might expect, it's not exactly an attractive name. As they start running out of ideas, Zabuton points toward the door and MC opens it. As he looks out, inspired by the towering great tree in the village center, he decides to call the place the Great Tree Village. They celebrate this occasion that night, with the crowd's cheers quickly turning into chants of mayor. Thus, in a suspiciously undisputed democratic election, MC becomes their leader. Late that night, MC confides in a drunken Hakurin, saying he thinks it's a dream since he's so happy, but she tells him it isn't. They're going to keep living together, enjoying their lives. After a night of partying, our MC gets up and continues with his daily routine. A warning sound from Zabuton alerts him. He is informed that a messenger from the demonic kingdom has arrived. Beazle introduces himself and asks to speak to whoever is in charge. MC realizes that this falls within the scope of his duties as mayor. He introduces himself as the mayor and Beazle eye him carefully. He then produces a gift, but this sudden motion alerts the other angels. Bazil calmly produces a gift that Rue sees and excitedly takes from MC. Beazle delivers a message from the demon lord inquiring about their presence in the forest. MC recalls Rue mentioning something about the forest where they reside as being part of the demon lord's domain. This gets MC thinking about what might the purpose of the demon lord be. Is he asking for taxes? Or are they going to be evicted? So typical, becoming a mayor has made MC a politician, and now has to speak his mind without fearing the loss of votes. MC thinks of asking Rue and Lia, but Rue just winks at him. He thinks this is a sign of confidence of him as a mayor, so he decides to take matters into his own hands. If the demon lord accepts us living in this land, we will give him part of our harvest. This surprises Beazle. MC feels it is right to show that he has no intention of rebelling against the demon lord. As for the rate, MC promises 10%. Beazle's eyes widen, and this makes MC think he had given him such a low offer. Beazle asks if these are the terms he is okay with. MC hesitantly says yes and asks them to pick up the harvest every year before the winter. Bazil agrees to the term and promises to proceed according to MC's instructions. MC is surprised at how fast the negotiations were settled. They go inside the house and draw up a contract, well, in this case a treaty. MC clarifies that the tax would only cover their harvest and not anything they produce through livestock like their milk, eggs, honey, and alcohol. If the demon lord wanted their other products, they would have to enter into another trade agreement. Wow, just a few months on the job and our mayor is revealing top-notch diplomatic skills. Never thought those were included in the farming skills. As Beazle leaves, MC thinks he has been too aggressive with the negotiations. Alone with his girls, MC asks how he did as mayor. Rue congratulates him for negotiating to have their village under the demon lord's protection. Tia also chimes in as he was able to give 10% when the going rate was 50% to 60%. Wow, Even in their world, the government sucks you dry with taxes. I mean 50%. How can you guys live with only 50% of your salary going to bureaucrats and politicians? Anyway, and commends how MC successfully made the demon lord acknowledge their village by requiring them to visit every year. Rhea also sees their once-a-year visit will not give them the ability to accurately measure their crop yields, so they cannot collect the right taxes. Typical taxpayer mentality, finding ways to lower paying taxes. I knew there was a lesson here somewhere. In summary, MC's first foray as a politician yielded to them the protection of the demon lord, lower taxes, and an elixir that can cure anything if you drink or rub it in the injured part. Back in the kingdom of the demon lord, Beazle reports on his mission. Gratz is suspicious that MC had agreed to be subjected under them, as they were able to take down a wyvern in 2 hits. Randon thinks MC may have some ulterior motives for this. Beazle also had his suspicions but could not do anything but agree to the terms. He says the vampire princess and the angel of annihilation were there as well. Gratz is surprised that the great sage and mightiest of all the angels were all with MC. Randon starts shaking in his boots while Beazle continues with his report. He also saw a group of high elves and a pack of infernal wolves. He was presented to MC by a trio of killer angels. He was pissing in his pants, thinking he would not see the light of day. Gratz realizes how powerful they all were. Beazle had dared not refuse any of MC's demands, as they could not afford to have the village as their enemy. He still feels it was a successful negotiation, as all things ended amicably. Typical of a politician finding ways to sugarcoat everything. He shows them the gift MC had given to them. They decide to open it and inspect it. It turned out to be apples, and Gratz takes one to check for poison. Beazle tells him to stop, as he cannot just eat the apples without telling the demon lord. He then realizes that the cloth the gift came with was made from a great demon spider. Gratz can't believe that the village would house something that had fought the former demon lord to a standstill. Randon stands and says he is resigning, again. I wish that were true of all politicians. The next day, the leader of the dragons, Drime, comes to visit and brings a gift of a fancy-looking sword with a scabbard. MC feels the gift may be a little extravagant and violent, but accepts it, nonetheless. Drime's servant explains that since they are technically neighbors, they decided to greet them and introduce themselves. Witnessing a wyvern's death in 2 hits does that to kingdoms. MC invites them into their house, so Drime transforms into a smaller form. He reintroduces himself, and MC observes Drime seems to have memorized his lines. After a few rounds of drinks, Drime gets drunk and wants to start living there. His servant reminds him of his kingly duties, but he does not seem to care. Drime reluctantly leaves, bringing home some of the apples MC had given them. Having guests 2 days in a row makes MC start to think of a better place to welcome them. The next day, MC shares his plan to build a small guest house for visitors. At first, he thinks they should just build a small house that can accommodate 4 people. But the elves point out people coming to their village come far off and have to travel through mountains and the forest. Their first 2 visits were from nobility, but they will also need to take into consideration people traveling in large groups. They settle on building a house that could fit 30. They all got to work. MC decides to spruce up their diplomatic entourage. Gran Maria and the other angels would be in charge of defending their perimeter. Their way of bringing uninvited guests may not bring the best experience. The warning that Zabuton makes everyone grab a weapon and attack visitors is not exactly a welcoming sight. MC makes Zabuton use a bell made by the elves to signal the arrival of visitors. He tries to form a small receiving party for guests, but his idea was rejected, as enemies might disguise themselves as visitors. So, the welcoming party grew to include lizard men and high elves. I mean, nothing spells welcome more than a bunch of mythical creatures and warriors, right? Flora became in charge of keeping tabs on their guests who stay overnight. This is where MC learns Flora and Rue could go for days without sleeping. After they made these changes, Garf and some beastmen came to the village to establish trade. Graf explains they come from a village in the East Mountains called the Howling Village. Rue steps up and greets them. She asks if the entire group were present so they could rest in their newly built guest house. When Garf says they are complete, Rue changes her demeanor and declares they will just treat the other beastmen as enemies. Two beastmen give a shout as the infernal wolves push them out of hiding. Garf guilty apologizes and explains that the stragglers were part of his group. Rue gently explains they should always make sure everyone was together before entering the village, and they should behave while they are there. Wow, this is like a veiled threat from a seasoned politician. They bring the beastmen to the guest house and are greeted by Anne and the maids. The beastmen of course excitedly ogle the maids in their outfits and their bulging melons. Boys will be boys, I guess. But then, things take a strange turn when Rue and Tia lock the door outside. MC objects to their actions. It turns out local custom dictates that visitors bring a gift when they go to the village first time, like the messenger and the dragon. Doubtful, MC inquires if they are not friendly enough. Tia responds that since they did not follow the usual customs, they would not be treated as visitors. So, there you have it. To make good impressions and get the normal visitor treatment, make sure to bring some gifts whenever you go meet new people. Otherwise, you may get locked in. Rue and Tia also post guards outside the door for extra measure. MC asks why the angel trio did not capture the two supposed stragglers. Apparently, they were not perceived as a threat, but Pia promises to punish them for this. MC asks her to go easy on them and she agrees to let them off with a warning. I thought this story was about to turn into some form of dictatorship. Fortunately, MC has a cool enough head to keep things more or less democratic. The next day, and prepares their guests' meal, which to MC was not at par with the food they served Drime. She admits they are below standard as they had brought nothing. Again, please be reminded to bring gifts when you meet someone for the first time. During the meal, MC was a bit ashamed for giving the beastmen a meager meal. Tia and Rue remind him they are trying to find out the reasons they are there. It was MC who had insisted on serving them wine, actually their word was forced. MC had made the maids serve a maximum of 2 cups of wine per person as he wanted to show kindness despite not knowing what they wanted with the village. Well, our MC has a plan in place at least. He approaches Garf and asks what kind of place Howling Village is. He explains it was 500 years old, but stories say it was 1,000 years. But you know how stories eventually become tall tales. Most of their population are beastmen and they are a collection of about 100 settlements. The wine had worked and loosened the tongues of the beastmen. Howling Village was mainly a hunting and mining town. They survived through establishing trade relations with a human village across the mountains. But due to some trouble with that village, trade became unstable and unreliable. They had heard of the village from one of the demon lord's people and decided to try establishing trade with them. Tia uses her charm to ask why there were 2 stragglers that did not enter the village with them. A beastman, clearly drunk, admits they had to take precautions as it was their first time dealing with them. The 2 were assigned to go back and inform their village in case something happened to the main group. The next day, they start their trade negotiations. Without currency, they decide to use the age-old barter system. But MC gets the idea to use some form of currency in the future. They invite MC to go to their village to trade directly there as they had difficulty getting to the Great Tree Village. MC points out that they too will have the same problem, but thinks he can convince Kuro and the dogs to pull their good through the forest. Beastmen offer them products made from the ore they mined, and MC gladly takes all they had to offer. In return, MC promises to bring them foodstuff. As Garf leaves, he apologizes for not knowing the local custom of bringing gifts but promises to bring a gift from their humble village. MC gladly accepts their promise but reminds them it's not the value of the gift but the thought that counts. I wonder if that really works in today's society. After Garf leaves, they make arrangements to bring their foodstuff. Drime happily volunteers to carry them on his back in exchange for a barrel of wine. Drime had been a constant visitor, bringing expensive gifts and getting drunk every time he visits. But he receives no complaints, as everybody seems to love his gifts. Drime brings everyone to Howling Village, who were surprised by the arrival of a dragon. After a few days, they return and brought the good news of their success. Drime, however, was sulking in the corner, as Tia had traded even the wine that was meant for him. MC promises he can just double what he normally drinks at dinner. This cheers him up. Tia reports that the mayor wanted 20 women wanted to live in their village as well. MC feels the imbalance of gender in their village and insists they have at least 2 young men with them. The Howling Village sends the new settlers and they bring all the girls with 3 young boys. Something clearly must have been lost in the transmission of his message. MC panics as he realizes that the boys will need about 5 to 10 years more before they can help repopulate the village, thus leaving him with a harem-like life still. The story picks up after the beast folk from Howling Village moved in. Apparently, they all thought they were going to be treated horribly when they arrived, but Hiraka had no such intentions. Instead, their new members were able to enjoy all the luxuries of their settlement, including the heated baths. And remarks, even though there are no problems with these new arrivals, there's still a problem. They faint quite often. MC says they will just have to get used to these things over time. As they watch the beast folk children play, one of them trips but Senna casts feather fall on him, causing him to gently float to the ground. MC asks if she can use magic too, and when she tells him she can, he begins to feel a bit awkward. He turns to Hakurin, who can also use magic, and seems to grow a bit embarrassed when she informs him almost everyone here can use magic. In fact, all of the angels she knows can, and all of the high elves use magic to help with their construction. It's common too for the Oni to be able to use fire and water magic, and even the lizard folk can do the same. And when Hiraku turns to the last hopes he has, he finds out the wolves have shadow magic, and Zabuton and the queen bee both have fire magic. As he slowly claps, depressed, saying even the bees have magic, as if to rub it in, one of the waste processing slimes slides over and blows out a torrent of fire from between its derpy eyes. But all is not lost. Senna urges him to cheer up, reassuring him not everyone can use magic after all. For example, the children she brought from the Howling Village. But as they tug at him, asking him to practice with them, he says he has a feeling even they will surpass him soon. Hiraka resolves to just focus on what he can do. Farming. Unfortunately, trouble has its way of finding him, and there's a massive tremor as the ground starts to shake. MC looks around as he wonders if there was an earthquake, or something. Answers arrive in the form of one of the angels, Gran Maria, who flies over with a report. A grappler bear and a bloody viper are fighting in the northern area of the forest. He's surprised only 2 creatures can cause such a disturbance, and the angel asks nervously, "What should we do?" It would be dangerous to get involved without a plan, but the village might be in danger if we do nothing. MC thinks for a moment before asking her about more details so he can make an evacuation plan for the village. Just kidding. This is an overpowered MC anime, so he instead asks her how these creatures would taste. The angel flies Hiraku over and they spot the 2 giant monsters fighting. Maria says they should go back for help, but as the monsters look up at them, MC tells her to drop him off really quickly. And sure enough, 1 punch later, both creatures are as dead as my dreams of being an astronaut dinosaur keeper. Kuro and the angels watch, stunned by MC's power, as the lizard folk arrive. They drag the beasts back to the village, while MC remarks it's his biggest catch yet. MC cuts the bear into bits and prepares a sort of stew, adding various spices, herbs and wine to make wine-braised grappler bear, a delicious yet incredibly gamey dish. Hiraka tries frying the bloody viper, treating it essentially as if it